Hi, I'm Ben, and welcome to Subject Access, a podcast where I interview experts who work at the intersection of law, privacy, and AI. And in each week, we unpack what the rules are, how organizations are implementing them, and what's coming next. Today, we're going to be looking at DSARs, data subject access requests. Uh, the right of access was meant to give people control over their data, but increasingly it turns up in consumer or employment disputes and litigation, or it arrives in a coordinated wave designed to disrupt an organization. Now, this right was meant to give people greater visibility, greater control over their data, and we're now seeing it being weaponized. And it's, from my view, rarely used for its designed purpose, raises a lot of questions around the unintended consequences of the legislation. In this episode, I'm sitting down with James Robson to ask whether the right of access is broken. James is a privacy consultant and the founder of Datum Longevitus, where he provides fractional DPO support and research data consultancy to charities, research bodies, and mission-led organizations. James was previously the DPO at the Labour Party, and there he handled subject access requests at a really high scale and in a very high scrutiny political environment. He's also held DPO roles at Foundations and Neighbourly Lab. James champions compliance-led data sharing, using good governance to enable better research and services and not just to manage risk. And we met earlier this year at the IAPP conference in London, and I attended James's session on DSARs, and I thought it was really interesting, and got to learn more from his experience. So welcome, James, and thanks for joining today.
No, thanks, Ben. I mean, ever since we've been in touch, and especially the name of the podcast being Subject Access, I've just felt I have a story for you. It's almost second to none. And I remember being a kind of a consultant in the early days of GDPR back in 2016, 2017, telling people, what this is like the PPE scandal. You know, the lawyers picking it up and like coming after you and after your money and compensation. Little did I know that I'd be the one on the end of something like that, but I'm sure we'll get into that. But lovely to be here.
Thanks, James. And I wonder if that could be a really good place to start. So it'd be great to hear a bit about what's brought you to your current position and what's exciting you at the minute. Perhaps, taking us through that journey from the Labour Party to where you are now.
Yeah, I'm super passionate about being able to interject the understanding of data sharing, movement of data from A to B to help people. Simple. The mission-led research and investigations on what works to help people and create some evidence-based research around that. It's not as straightforward as just one survey, but it's multiple points of data. And what I found when I was the data protection officer for Foundations before the Labour Party, back then it was actually known as it was called What Works for Children's Social Care. What I found there was they'd have these wonderful concepts of how to conduct some research to see what works over here and see if it works over here and design best practices out of that. But they wouldn't have necessarily completely thought through the data sharing and data protection implications of a massive data sharing project that was. It's almost like data sharing project is hand in hand with the actual research and the incredible outputs. And I just found that there's a real benefit for this knowledge, and I can inject this. Well, where are you getting it from? Why are you getting it? Let's coordinate that. Let's put this into a data sharing agreement between all the parties, so they've got the accountability of how the data is being used and shared. And I realized that I could influence and possibly speed up the trials that were going on, the evidence-based trials. And I just got totally enamored by that and thought, I can help something. I feel like it's a real worthwhile thing. And just as I was getting to a point where back then where I think I can do this on a wider scale than just the bunch of organizations I was doing it concurrently, and I wanted to grow this, I then got the job for the Labour Party. because I wanted to help them. I thought the Conservative Party at that point was completely messing up the country and getting things wrong and needed a change of leadership. Simple as that. And now, after almost 2.5 years of doing the Labour Party gig, which I'm sure we'll get into, I just thought, okay, I've done a shift there. I still have that passion. And so actually set up Datum. And that is now what I do. I've got a bunch of clients in that space and looking for more, anything that needs a bit of help. And I just keep getting referred to these other projects that have those similar challenges. They're mission led. They have incredible intentions, but how do we get the data bit right? And they struggle. And I'm like, yes, I can feed that. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. What really comes through strongly from watching you speaking before and what you're saying there is the kind of the mission led piece and what like you actually really care about this. And what's interesting and what I'm learning as I'm doing this podcast is all of the guests I've spoken to and a lot of people in privacy care about individuals, and that's something that I think is a really nice thing that comes through, a really positive thing that across the board, from legal design to lawyers to everyone in between, it's that kind of rings true throughout. So yeah, it's just a cool observation. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, I've not yet found a malicious DPO in my time in this sector at all. I agree. It's almost like it takes the reins off you having to worry about telling the truth, because that's your job is about telling the truth.
Yeah,
against what you know, and it actually is about helping people and protecting people from misuse of their data. I'm like, well, it's just ended up attracting people to go, oh, this is quite nice. It's quite a lovely role, and I can do some good here, in each part of it. So yeah, I agree. I've not met one, interestingly.
Yeah, that's a positive positive thing, that's for sure. So with this episode, what I've started doing is putting in kind of an aim or a mission statement of the episode at the start. So what I've got for this one is we want to give privacy practitioners a candid and grounded view of the weaponization problem and what we're seeing with the use of DSARs for weaponization. So looking at like what the problem looks like, how organizations are coping and dealing with it, and then looking more at the system and saying like what's failing here and what might fix it. So to start with this, let's look at this kind of the central tension around is this right of access broken? And as I mentioned at the start, the aim of this right is to give people meaning control of their data so they have more transparency, control, and organizations are able to be kind of held to account more. But what we're seeing in practice is that this is being used for weaponization against organizations. In my time in-house, the only time we genuinely saw DSARs was like very, very rare. And the majority was, we're angry with you as a business for whatever reason, or there's an employment dispute, or it's something like that. So I'm kind of the view that it is rarely used in the right way. Do you agree with that? Is this right of access broken, or is there something else going on here?
Broken is strong, but I do agree with you. So to come from my angle and the story that I bring, on June 4th, 2024, in the lead up to polling day for the UK general election, which was on the 4th of July, 2024. Bearing in mind, there's the 30-day, 1-month response period for data subject access requests. The Labour Party and all political parties, we found that there were political activists, political actors, if you like, who had set up easy to fill in web forms that would automatically request a data subject access request of all political parties. Now, that was through the Open Rights Group and also the Good Law Project. Both of those organizations have done good things. I don't think this was one of them, because it was more about agitation of the political process than it was actually taking a stance on something that people needed to have action taken on behalf of. Now, that's a particular type of weaponization. And what was it trying to achieve? And this is the crux of the matter we couldn't quite get to. And therefore, I do think it was, I could even say manifestly unfounded, because there wasn't a legitimate goal on behalf of the individual that was sending in these requests via this route to do anything than agitate the political process. It wasn't about them finding out what you know, why you know it, where's my data going, all the things you have to responding. So yeah, that was abused and misused. So for that purpose, absolutely broken.
Mm.
Now, um, a person going through an employment tribunal dismissal, they want to get further information. Yes, there are legal means to do so as well. And DSAR is one means that you can get further information and wonder, maybe has somebody said something about me, or I want to understand more about those things. So there's that aspect, but I also think you will receive those if somebody is on a disciplinary path anyway, and whether it's justified or not, they're likely to throw one in just to annoy their employer or previous employer. Um, I have known individuals that have legitimately sent in a subject access request to their employer, and they've been there for maybe 15 years. So that's a lot of data. But because there was another discrimination process that they were going through, and I think, legitimately, that is a legitimate request, but they're so few and far between. I think it's more things like, I had a friend of mine that was the data protection officer for William Hill, the gaming gambling site. And he actually set up a whole team of individuals. I think they were based in Manila, of all places, because people that had lost money or felt, the system was rigged against them when they were doing their betting and gambling, or they lost a lot of money, they'd throw in a data subject access request because they were annoyed, not because they actually wanted any information. I'm sure some of them are legitimately, what's happened to my data? I don't think this game's been fair. So it's part of the complaints process as well. But there are a high volume of them, and I agree, most of them are not legitimate to a cause that I think a reasonable person would support. Just like, you're just trying to be annoying. You're trying to do something
Yep.
on a whim. Yeah, I agree.
So three things really came through there in terms of, like, you've got the group DSARs, or using a third party or some kind of entity to exert pressure over organizations,
Yeah,
the employment piece, and
yeah.
then also the kind of individual who's aggrieved in some way. And I just want to ask you a little bit about each of those. So with the kind of group situation, or where you were told to take things on each case on its individual merits, and saying, okay, that's broken. How would you fix that? Do you think that you could say, take that all together, taken all together, that becomes unfounded, or there's an issue there? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it is manifestly excessive to have an external actor setting up a facility just to agitate something, because that is not coming from the individual, from a genuine place. I don't think they even care. It's just their opportunist way of interacting or protesting against a system, a business, a political party, a way of thinking. I don't think that's a legitimate use. I mean, but how do you then differentiate that if an individual doesn't have to justify the reason for that request? Therefore, you can't know. You can't say, "Oh yeah, I've had 1,000 in 2 days." They're all legitimate, because each of those people want to know exactly what's going on with the data, because it's going to benefit themselves in some way. I just can't see that being the truth for that volume.
It's interesting because I was just thinking then about the kind of denial of service attacks, where people, flood a website and
Yeah.
take the website down. And I'm not sure on the legal position on that, but I'm pretty sure you can get in quite a lot of trouble for it. But ultimately, the same thing is going on here with mass DSARs. I almost think that the reason that it's probably not an issue is because maybe there's just no real threat behind it. I know we've spoken before, like actually in most cases, if you don't respond to a DSAR within time and the ICO messages you because someone's complained, it's kind of just a case of sort it out. Do you think that if there was a bigger threat, then there might be kind of changes in the law there? And yeah, like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's a strange one. One late DSAR that somebody's complaining about, they're not going to do much about that. I mean, they have a pragmatic flexibility. If you're kind of 3, 4, 5 days late in responding, then the ICO not gonna care so much as long as you do. What they do care about is if you don't provide any response whatsoever, they will start asking questions, and then it's questions about process and whether or not you actually uphold the law in that way. Have there been any fines based on lack of response to DSARs? Well, I sort of hope there is one very soon. There's been a reprimand. I know that because I had one in Labour, because back in 2021, Labour had a data breach, which was widely publicised then, and all the Labour Party got was a reprimand. Interestingly, in the weaponised period in 2024, during a general election, the Reform Party didn't answer any of them. And the Good Law Project are continuing a case against them as a breach of course, GDPR and possibly human rights, as a class action against the Reform Party. And it's going to be interesting how that plays out, because theoretically, if the ICO are going to uphold thousands of complaints and a class action suit, there should be a fine, in my mind. Take the politics out of it. They haven't upheld the law, and if they don't, I'll be concerned. Well, it sort of makes DSARs pointless. Just don't answer them. Horrible for me to say. I say don't break the law, but if the law isn't going to be upheld in any capacity whatsoever, then what's the point in answering them? So it is broken, 100% there. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And kind of turning to that employment piece, I think there's obviously often a very big power imbalance between an organization and an individual in an employment case. And there is that real benefit to the employee to be able to get the information they need. But I kind of think that in theory, sounds great, but in practice, very often the requests that come in are, I want everything on me across all systems. And if I've been here, you said, that example of someone there for 15 years, that is a completely untenable amount of data to sift through across emails, instant messaging, documents, whatever it might be. So to my mind, I think that is actually a position where it's the in principle is really positive for the individual because it can help them in their case. But the reality is that it's rarely used in the right way.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think one of the instrumental changes in the Data Use and Access Act has been kind of the reasonable search, the reasonable discovery of information, and the allowance for organizations to say, pinpoint what you want me to look at, and I'll go and look at that, because 15 years of information is kind of crazy. Possibly, I'm not going to hang my hat on this, but, possibly the ICO would say it would be okay to cause it to say it was a manifestly unfounded DSAR, should they then insist on, I want the full 15 years. If the period that they were potentially aggrieved was, a 3-month, 6-month, maybe even a year's period, and they go, well, I want a year before and I want the year after and that one. And I would probably say, you know what, why not? That seems reasonable. Let's do it that way, rather than the full breadth of it. And then you get into what's a reasonable amount to charge someone if they are going to ask for the full 15, 20 years of employment history as well, if they insist. I've not actually known of any organization to charge for GDPR-based DSAR. Never heard of it, actually. There was a charge for DSARs in the Data Protection Act of 98. You could, nominal, but yeah, I've not heard that yet, and it's going to be curious how that plays out. Yeah, I hope that answered the question. Might have gone off piece and touch.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think in terms of the charge point, the only time I've seen it is in relation to someone requesting a printed version and the business
Right.
saying, if it's such an amount of documents, we need to charge you for that.
I
And then
once had, sorry to cut in. I
no,
once
no,
had somebody say, they requested it digitally. We sent it digitally, and then they came back 3 weeks later. I want it printed and send it to me, and I'm like, okay, so we did.
yeah. Yeah, it's a funny one, and probably that ended up in the bin straight
Yeah,
away anyway. So
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, agreed.
And then that final point. So we said sort of the group, the employment situation, and then just on the individual point. Again, there's that kind of power imbalance, I think, and between individuals and organizations. And if you're an individual who's, I don't know, had a poor service, been aggrieved in some way, had an organization not, there could any kind of issues they've had with the organization, it's almost using it as a tool to try and exert some power and influence over them. So again, just as a sort of another way of putting it, although it might be broken in terms of the intended purpose of giving people more access to their information, do you think there is a positive unintended consequence that it redresses power in some way between an individual and an organization?
I agree with that. I think that's right. And it brings me into the thinking, which I spoke to a lot of people about, that individuals don't have enough agency or control over the personal data that organizations use of them at all. And this is only one of those little windows where you can. I mean, it doesn't necessarily allow you to control what they're doing with the data, but it does allow you to maybe have a visibility into almost the exacts of how they use the data, and then possibly for you to find where they are doing something wrong, or they are non-compliant in the way they're doing it, so it's an illegal use of their data in some respect, and then that could potentially influence the organization to take a step back and look at itself. Is either we're going to have a claim because of this misuse, or we're going to change it and say sorry and hope we don't get a claim, and hold our hands up to it. Maybe that is the way that an individual through a DSAR can exert some sort of influence, yes, but on a general basis, kind of not really. Yeah.
Yeah. And sticking with that organizational point, you've mentioned examples from the political parties not responding, not keeping up. Do you
Yeah.
think this is and more broadly beyond the political parties, perhaps moving into the organizations you're working with now and businesses as well, do you think that non-compliance is that actually this is a phenomenal workload, we can't deal with it? Or is it a case of actually we just don't prioritize it because we know there's no real risk and we don't want to deal with it?
There's a lot in what you said there. And I'm going to try and remember, because I think there may be a case that in some boards or CEOs or C-level individuals, if they really dug into how much action the ICO would take and how much exposure they'd have if they were more non-compliant than maybe they are, I think it may be further down the pecking order as there's no return on investment. Let's tick it over. Let's not put money into it, which is such a shame. I hate to think that is the way people think, but I think they do. So there is the keeping up appearances piece there. And now I have forgotten what the rest of your initial statement was.
Prioritization within businesses, or are they actually is it too much work?
So here's another thought. Now, generally with the charities that I work with and research houses that I work with, they don't get any rights requests. Nobody's asking to delete the data or asking for copies of it. And it makes me wonder if you have the individuals thinking, well, they're a nice organization, they do good things for people, therefore I'm not going to bother them, and I'm not worried. I'm not worried if they're compliant or not. Actually, whether the research house is losing the data or has leaks or whatever, which is curious, because then you get the emotive feeling towards a large corporate where, don't like large corporates, make lots of money, jealousy, whatever we've been indoctrinated with over the years of anarchism, and we need to take action against these big corporations. But they may be doing things completely right and completely above board, but they will still receive a high volume of DSARs and rights requests. Some do get it really right. Some do. I don't necessarily want to name names, but so I'm not going to. But there's a number of big there's a FTSE 50 e-commerce and retail organization that I did a lot of work for, and they were a machine, and it was phenomenal, and they just got it right. And it's like, well, yeah, that is one thing. We'll tick the box, and so it's not even a concern. Everything done, and that was really good to see. The problem I think out there right now is it is way too easy. If you know how to read a privacy notice, it's way too easy to go and find a privacy policy. It's a privacy notice policy at the bottom of most websites. Have a look at it and go like, yeah, that's non-compliant, or doesn't say the right words as the shop window into how they use their data, therefore suggestive that they don't use data correctly. And that is far too ubiquitous. It's far too easy to pick holes in stuff. I think everything needs a level up around it all. But I'm not sure there will ever be a day of reckoning. I do call for microfining. Get the words wrong on your privacy notice, have a microfine, or have 3 months to sort it out. And if you don't, have a microfine, because then yes, people go, well, we just want to avoid the microfine. We'll get our words right. Great. Now you got the words right. Now show us some internal documents so you got those right and how it works, and have a little kind of regulator audit where they are like an Ofsted inspection. Teachers and schools go out of their minds with stress, and it's sometimes horrendous because of that level of scrutiny, and maybe the label of outstanding. I think the current government is changing the one word labels for schools, but that's a whole other matter. Like outstanding or needs improvement or whatever. Now, what if there was some sort of nutrition labeling for organizations via a regulator to improve those standards? Maybe there would be better standards and would be better processes, and people would be more protected as well. I think that might be the right way to go. Yeah.
Yeah. And what it comes back to, just you made an interesting point around not getting DSARs at charities. It's all because they're doing good. There's almost an element of trust here. So I trust that that's a good organization, a charity. I'm not going to make their lives any more difficult, but that's a big evil business. I don't trust them. I'm going to try and exert and use the DSAR as a way of like having some more power over them. Do you think people care enough about privacy to make purchasing decisions or usage decisions off the back of that? Something like that.
I do.
Yeah.
I just don't think it's been stress tested enough. I think if it starts to get into the public vernacular of this is more trustworthy with your data than not, as the differentiator between what are essentially the same companies, or companies doing the same thing, same service, same product, I'd go with that one. Of course I would. I mean, as a privacy professional, I reject all cookies. I turn off the tracking. All that kind of jazz is just now normal. Whereas I know that the least friction approach for people is just like, okay, whatever, fine. But there does need to be a public education piece around that. But having that label and that stamp on there where people are like, what is that? And then have a quick look, and very simply to go, yeah, well, we're more protective of you and the harms that it could cause you if we lost this data or sold this data. You don't really have any further visibility outside of what might be an incomplete privacy notice. If you do have this bit, yeah, slightly better.
Yeah, it feels like an education piece. I think there are people in the privacy space who would choose a product because it does increase privacy. But like I was out at a conference yesterday with our sales team, and I'm the privacy guy in the organization, and I've got a privacy screen on my phone. I use Brave as my internet browser. I have a VPN and like all these things, but they kind of see that as quite funny and have a bit of a laugh at me. But it's that education piece in the same way. And I always use this analogy of like the net zero moment for environmental cases was people started to care about environmental stuff. Whereas I think privacy is still on that journey. which has been made harder by more AI and things kind of, these really cool things that people want to engage with, which perhaps use a lot of data, and the kind of care about data or the concern about data goes down the list a little bit.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with that. And we haven't even touched on AI in this chat either, and it does throw a huge spanner into the privacy mix. Because yes, okay, that AI may use the data in a certain way to produce an outcome, but then do you expect your data then to be used for a different purpose, which is to train it and iterate on that tool getting better, or then your data being used for a different use case because you realize the usefulness, or the AI says, oh yeah, company, you can do this with the data, by the way. And yeah, but you haven't told them, and that's not in their expectation. And, really spin it back around it popped into my mind, earlier in our conversation, but I didn't articulate it. Is the weaponization of AI use for DSARs, or DSARs weaponization through the use of AI to automate requests, using AI, and that has begun to become a thing as well.
Have you seen kind of a noticeable increase of stuff where you're like, this is definitely AI? Are you seeing people's tenacity with the responses increasing? I think speaking to friends in businesses, they're starting to see a lot more people writing very strong, pretty good sounding letters on the surface of it. But the reality is that it's all over the place. You read it and you try and break down the legal analysis and it makes no sense. How do you think people should handle that kind of situation?
Respond matter of factly about within the parameters of responding to a DSAR. Calling out. Like, well, let's say your company doesn't use Signal. Then why have they asked for Signal if you are an employee there and you know about it? You're like, well, we don't have Signal. We wonder why you've used that. And I think there's a possibility of more manifestly unfounded findings because of just crazy amounts of information and legalese being used by an LLM, where I don't think the person even requesting it understands what that means. Questioning them, having a bit of pushback. I think there definitely does need to be more ID verification on those requests as well, especially if you've got an AI that is maybe doing. Have you heard of the company Mine?
Yeah.
It's called,
Yeah.
where you can connect it to your inbox and it will auto email all of the companies that you've interacted with that happen to have sent you emails, and say either delete me or can I have all my information, or all at once. But what you realize, if you do connect to Mine, then all your data and all your emails and your possibly your entire estate ends up getting into their servers, and they have a copy of that as well. So that's a bit crazy. But ensuring that you do ask for ID and you are going to be given the right information back to someone, I think there needs to be more enforcement there. If it's written badly and doesn't make sense, refuse it. Please make it clear on what exactly you want, because we don't understand because of the amount of language that you've used in this. I think there can be a lot more refusals than there are. People do get worried. Companies do get worried. Oh, we've had a DSAR. I know of kind of really good data protection practitioners that they want to uphold a person's rights. They want to respond to DSARs. They may not get all that many DSARs, and now they're getting a few, and they're very worried about them. Now, I hadn't dealt with many before my time at Labour, and now I've dealt with tens of thousands of them, and I'm like, just push back and don't even worry if there's a complaint that goes to the ICO. The ICO for one DSAR where you're asking further questions and for clarity, and you're not trying to obfuscate, you're not trying to kind of dodge the question or the request. As long as you're not doing that, then one, take your time, make sure what they're requesting is legitimate, and ask for further information, or for a manifestly unfounded or manifestly excessive, even if it doesn't completely align to the definition of unfounded or excessive. which is again a very strange thing to say as a practitioner with 10 years in. But you have time to try and get it right. And if somebody is yanking your chain or just trying to be really annoying, have a little bit of pushback. Not completely. Don't have it as a blanket policy. We just don't do these. I mean, yeah, the regulation should come down fairly hard on that. But yeah, take your time and question it.
Cool. I think it would be good to sort of move towards now, like talking about fixes, solutions. You touched there on the identification piece. It'd be great to hear a bit more about perhaps the identification side, but also the solutions that some people are saying building where you can go in, download all your data, and they've set the systems up in a way which enable that really easily. Because if you can do it in a way which is automated and has you upload your ID or whatever, it makes sure you're a genuine person, so it prevents the data breach. So there's good safety there. And then in terms of actually getting the information, there's not a massive burden on businesses. To my mind, all of the issues evaporate. You then can just give people their data, things move on. What's your take on that approach?
Yeah, make it frictionless and easy. I think that's right. The issue around that is the capital expenditure to have to be able to set it up in the first place. And I don't think those budgets have been put aside for most companies. It's a bit of an afterthought. I mean, if they don't receive many DSARs, then why make it completely easy to get hold of one if it's not going to benefit volumes of people that are slowing you down. So there's a cost benefit analysis for the organization to do. Hey, if you are a large organization or larger organization that does receive a lot of attention, a lot of people wanting to take a look at things, then yeah, absolutely set it up and have the feeds from the different data sets pushing into a fairly easy to read PDF that's downloadable, and that does happen. Again, one of the problems there is if one of those systems then changes or has a code update, then you've got to make sure the API doesn't break for that transaction and that download of data. So you've got to build it into the solution update and life cycle. Then if you onboard another product or service that's ingesting data in any way, or a new CRM system, then yet again you've got to remember to build that whole process in. So companies don't necessarily like to build things that they don't have to. So I agree it's a good idea and the right way to go. It's just could be prohibitive to do because of cost.
Yeah. So it's a classic case of, okay, well, we could try and build this internally, but there's not the appetite because all of our software engineers are deployed on actually building the product. And unless we're a massive organization, we definitely don't have resource to have a full-time engineer building privacy compliance. Or you go and procure the software. And if you're a small team, you would have to demonstrate that there would be a cost saving. If you only get a few DSARs, it takes up a lot of time, but the budget is perhaps not that great because you put your cheapest member of the team on it. They spend their time doing it, and it's cheaper than paying a lot of money for a tool. So if you were advising one of your clients or speaking to an organization, business, what would you say would be the kind of the top tips you would say to kind of move to a position where DSARs were being dealt with well, compliantly, within the right time frame, not necessarily within the 30 days, but within the 1 month, within the right time frame for the organization? And how would you tell them to get there?
So let's take the spreadsheet approach. Log and save the email and the date that came in. Log and save the date and the email of when you responded to say, thank you, we've gotten your DSAR, please can we have your ID? Then if they complain and say, I'm not sending you ID, I don't believe in that, reduce the level of ID. Maybe it doesn't need to be a photo ID, but say it's a bank statement or even a utility bill. Something physical they have. I always saw it as something you have, something the multi-factor authentication thing. While something is your password to your email, but somebody could crack that. But something you have would be the bit of paper of proof, which people didn't understand that even when I pushed back on them. Anyway, so make sure you do get some sort of physical proof. Photograph of that or so. Log that when you got it. what it was. Then the next step is acknowledge that you have received it, and the time starts now, and tell them what's the date that, unless we find some other information, this is why it's going to be 30 days from that point onwards. Then do your lookups. Now, the lookups are, what are your systems? Where's the data being processed? Now, some of those systems will just be the same information about somebody, because all you need is like the identifier to put them through, to log them in the system for whatever your process is. So whatever else is in there is not their personal data. It's just, you need their personal data as the identifier for whatever action is being taken. To sell something, do something, whatever. So you may go, well, these systems only hold a name and maybe an address. So I've got that. That's fine. Don't need to think about those. This one does have a lot more information. Let's work out. Let's work out a way. There is a button I can press and it just pulls it out and drops out for me. Get on top of eDiscovery Manager, the email tools that you have. That's Microsoft. I haven't done much for Google or Gmail. And then you've got to work out, well, how do you redact? What system or process? Probably better to get a license from one of the redaction vendors that are out there to make that easy as well. And then you need a quality assurance process. Almost once you've done your redaction, put it aside for 2 or 3 days and then go back to it and double check it. And when you're happy with it, maybe you need a legal review. So there's a legal review step as well. So they go, well, what's the exposure to the company and the individual if we were to share this? And there may be a bit of back and forth, the legal saying, we don't want to share that. And then the DPO saying, you have to, or not, or yeah, you're right. Actually, we don't need to. Log the reason why you are redacting each piece of information you are redacting somehow, because you can be questioned on that. Watch out for legal privilege as well, because now the Data Use and Access Act actually says there has to be a reason associated to every redaction of legal privilege or removal of information because it's legally privileged. Sort of, it's a weird one because it almost goes against the whole idea of having legal privilege. You just don't send it to them. In fact, in DSARs, you've got to say, this whole 3 pages of redaction, that's legally privileged because of this thing. Okay, fine. And then have a secure way of sharing. Don't do it via attached email. Do it via, a SharePoint, a secure SharePoint just for their email that they have to go through an authentication process to get access to it. And then give them a week of access to that. And if it's outside of that week, then they've got to go through the DSAR process again and it starts again for a month. Now, that's a lot. That's what I'd say to do. And there's lots of companies out there that say, we could just do that end to end for you. Not found one that can. Watch out for that. They can do bits of it, but not the whole lot. And I'm sure there'll be vendors listening to this going like, James, no, we can. Okay. So I'm happy to stand corrected. I hope that's helpful, but I know that's a lot.
Yeah. No, that's really helpful. I think one thing my day job at Wordsmith is building tools for privacy teams. One of the really tough nuts to crack was the ROPA, and I feel like we're on that journey for improving and building a way which saves people a heck of a lot of time. And the next target I've got in my sights is the DSAR piece. And there are, like you say, within Wordsmith at the minute, and I'm sure there are other tools as well. I'm not trying to plug it, but we've got redaction tools, and these have been built. We recently been iterating with our CTO on this around the tool that is pretty good at redaction. It produces the sort of markup and then the fully redacted version. And then we've added now comments into it. So it will say why it's redacted something, which it's a really useful thing. All the different stages, there's not really a workflow yet. So we're looking at that, but there's, like you say, there's nothing that can, again, I've not probably looked into this too much, but having that full end-to-end solution, which is trustworthy for organizations, or organizations so they can trust, that's the kind of silver bullet for DSARs. So yeah, like I say, if there is anything out there, it'd be really cool to see it. Cool. Okay. Well, thanks, James. I think we're at time. Kind of, we've covered a lot of ground. We've talked about the broken system of DSARs. We've pitched some ideas on how to fix things. We've looked at the processes organizations should take. It's been a productive call. But yeah, once again, thank you so much for sharing. And like, I know in our conversations we've had, you've been super candid about everything, and really appreciate you sharing openly. Just want to say at the end now, if people want to learn more about the work you do, your organization, what can they do to, where can they find you? What can they do?
Yeah, come find me on LinkedIn and send me a message over LinkedIn. I mean, you can email me as well. Feel free, james.robson@datumlongevitous.org, but that's quite difficult to spell. I find with people, so LinkedIn is the way to go. I mean, I want to help people who are doing good things for others. That's it. Any big solutions or ideas they have, get in touch with me, and I'd love to help.
Awesome. Thanks, James, and great to chat.
Thanks, Ben. Take it easy.